Coming up on Arirang News. In a display of scouting spirit, some 40,000 scouts gather at Seoul World Cup Stadium to mark the end of the 25th World Scout Jamboree. They were also treated to a K-pop concert. The U.S. strikes a deal with Iran to swap prisoners, releasing 5 detained Americans in exchange for freeing several jailed Iranians, and Tehran gaining access to $6 billion of funds frozen in South Korea. Typhoon Khanun, which brought heavy rainfall on Thursday, has left the country, causing damage to hundreds of properties, but with no official casualties reported. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with the finale of the 25th World Scout Jamboree. What's described as the world's largest youth camp is now officially over, with the closing ceremony taking place at Seoul World Cup Stadium. This following a star-studded K-pop concert. Our Shin Se-byuk leads us off.
The 25th World Scout Jamboree has finally come to a close after quite a journey. Some 40,000 Jamboree participants from over 140 countries gathered at Seoul World Cup Stadium on Friday for the closing ceremony. Those from the United States and the United Kingdom who withdrew last week due to the extreme heat wave were also there for the big finale. To safely transport Jamboree participants who've been relocated across the country since Tuesday due to the concerns over Typhoon Khanun, over 1,000 buses brought them to the stadium in the intervals between 2 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. To be prepared for any unexpected emergencies and medical situations, government authorities have set up 4 emergency medical stations on site and more than 10 ambulances were on standby. From heatwave to Typhoon Khanun, the 25th World Scout Jamboree was never an easy ride, but those who took part said they had fun during the 12-day program.
I feel very grateful for all the times when we were in the Jamboree, and I'm glad that they actually managed to open up the closing ceremony for us.
I met a lot of friends, and I met a lot of people. The culture, the food, it's all really beautiful, it's all very nice.
Followed by the 30-minute closing ceremony was the much-anticipated K-pop Super Live concert. Originally planned for Saemangum's outdoor stage on the 6th of August, the location went through a couple of switches due to sweltering conditions and Typhoon Khanun, first at Jeonju World Cup Stadium for the 11th and then to Seoul World Cup Stadium. 19 K-pop acts, including NewJeans, IVE, and NCT Dream, performed. With the official end of the Jamboree, the participants will make their way back home based on their schedules. However, there are post-event tours and activities lined up for those who wish to travel around South Korea even after the official end. To name a few, down in Gyeongju, they are rolling out cultural experience events, of which 400 participants from 5 countries, including Germany and Romania, have already signed up. The Seoul metropolitan government has also decided to offer special nighttime tours for scouts until Saturday. The Seoul Beach Festival over at Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul was supposed to wrap up today, but this has been extended until the 15th. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korea, the United States, and Japan are looking to make top-level meetings and joint military drills regular. That's reportedly being negotiated ahead of a meeting between the 3 leaders at Camp David next Friday. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
The leaders of South Korea, the United States and Japan are planning to meet at least once a year for trilateral talks and hold joint military exercises to deter North Korea's nuclear threat. That's according to a US diplomat Thursday, who said the 3 countries are close to finalizing a joint statement to be issued at Camp David after Presidents Yoon Suk-yeol and Joe Biden and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida hold talks next Friday. US Ambassador to Japan Rahm Emanuel told Japanese media that the joint document is being finalized and will include holding a yearly trilateral leaders meeting separate from international conferences. He said the leaders are also looking to conduct annual trilateral joint training between their militaries as North Korea continues to develop nuclear weapons and missiles and China strengthens its maritime advances.
These exercises would help improve interoperability while also demonstrating the partners' increasingly sophisticated missile defense capabilities. Another productive initiative could focus on identifying areas for cooperations between Korean Massive Punishment and Retaliations (KMPR) and Japan's new precision strike capability.
The three leaders will also strengthen intel sharing and cyber cooperation, as well as touch upon economic security.
When the leaders gather, the hottest area of economic cooperation will be strengthening mutual exchanges and collaboration in the semiconductor field and in supply chains of rare minerals, particularly for South Korea, with massive chip producers like SK Hynix in Incheon and Samsung Electronics. I am expecting the agreement to include developments in managing semiconductor cooperation.
This comes amid speculation that the three countries are working to build a mechanism for three-way cooperation, although it is unclear whether the joint statement would mention China or to what extent it would be alluded to, given the geopolitical sensitivities in the region.
So I think when it comes to PRC matters, it's going to be more in the general geostrategic challenge posed by Beijing and economic challenges, but perhaps less pointed and less hard-hitting than anything we might see on North Korea. For instance, I think there'll be sort of vague, veiled references to upholding the rule of law and against economic coercion.
On that note, Seoul's National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong told reporters last Friday that a consensus is being formed on holding the yearly trilateral gatherings and that the outcome will likely materialize after the leaders' discussions. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The head of an international organization that monitors signs of nuclear explosions worldwide is urging North Korea to refrain from testing its nuclear weapons. Robert Floyd, the chief of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, heralds the international body's partnership with South Korea and said that it is only getting stronger. Our Peunji reports.
North Korea's commitment to a moratorium on nuclear testing or signing the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty could be the first step to building the trust needed to lead to peace and security on the Korean peninsula. That's according to the head of the CTBTO, a global body that promotes the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. While noting that the nuclear test site in North Korea appears to be ready for use, he said the decision of whether or not to carry out another test lies with the North Korean leadership, and that the pathway to the future has got to be through dialogue.
I would call upon North Korea to do the responsible thing and commit with the rest of the nations of the world to a moratorium on nuclear testing.
North Korea conducted its sixth and last nuclear test in 2017. It declared a halt to all nuclear and ICBM tests in April 2018, but broke its self-imposed moratorium last year by resuming long-range missile tests. Based in Vienna, Austria, the CTBTO is responsible for seeking to establish a ban on nuclear testing and has more than 300 monitoring stations around the world to detect signs of a nuclear explosion.
So to the people of the Republic of Korea, we can say to you is that an explosion, a nuclear explosion in North Korea will be detected no matter where it is or when it takes place.
He also stressed that South Korea has been a strong supporter of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty from day one, and that the partnership is getting stronger. South Korea signed the treaty on September 24, 1996, and ratified it on the same day. Adopted by the United Nations in 1996, the treaty has near universal support, but has not been put into force, as it still needs ratification from 8 specific countries. The US, China, Egypt, Iran, and Israel have signed the treaty but not ratified it, and North Korea, India, and Pakistan have not even signed it. Meanwhile, on the public debate over whether South Korea should acquire its own nuclear weapons to deter threats from North Korea, he said the country has been taking a bold and responsible position to continue to call on the world without nuclear weapons. He added this has been a consistent position of the Korean government that is very much appreciated. Peunji, Arirang News.
Following its deal with the U.S., Iran is set to free 5 imprisoned Americans in exchange for several of its own detained in the U.S. and gain access to $6 billion of funds frozen in South Korea. Seoul responds it hopes this matter can be resolved smoothly. Choi Min-jung reports.
The United States and Iran have reached a prisoner swap deal in what is seen as an encouraging development in their rocky relationship. Sources familiar with the matter on Thursday said that Iran being given access to billions of US dollars in Iranian funds frozen in South Korea is also part of the deal.
First, it's a positive step that they were released from prison and sent to home detention. But this is just the beginning of a process that I hope and expect will lead to their return home to the United States.
It's reportedly known that the 5 Americans will be allowed to leave Iran in exchange for several returning to Iran from the U.S. once Tehran secures the $6 billion worth of oil payments frozen in South Korea. Citing an anonymous source, Iran's state media reported Thursday that funds in South Korea have been changed into euros in a bank in Switzerland. These dollars were locked in South Korea under sanctions imposed by the U.S., following its withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. A South Korean foreign ministry official told reporters that the ministry hopes this matter can be resolved smoothly. The frozen funds have become one of the main reasons behind South Korea and Iran's thorny relations, as Tehran has long been demanding that Seoul releases the funds. However, the U.S. clarified that the funds could only be used for humanitarian purposes like buying food or medicine.
Iran's own funds would be used and transferred to restricted accounts such that the monies can only be used for humanitarian purposes, which, as you know, is permitted under our sanctions.
The rare deal between Washington and Tehran reportedly comes after at least 2 years of negotiations. Though it is viewed as a positive step to their relations, there is also criticism that the funds allocated for humanitarian goods could be used for Iran's nuclear program. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Now, shifting gears, the South Korean government has seen positive signs in the country's economy despite a slowdown, due specifically to a recovery in exports and economic sentiment. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young has more.
South Korea's economic slowdown has eased due to a recovery in exports and improved economic sentiment, according to the Finance Ministry's Economic Green Book released on Friday. The ministry mentioned a slowing economy in its monthly assessment report for the 7th consecutive month. But it's the first time for the government to positively assess the slowdown trend since February.
As there's been an improvement in the manufacturing sector and exports, we have used a more positive expression for the economic assessment compared to last month. However, due to the unfavorable weather conditions in July and August, we added that there may be monthly fluctuations as a constraint factor in the report.
Exports in July recorded around $50 billion for a year-on-year decrease of 16.5%, but they're expected to see positive growth from October. Due to the decline in global energy prices, imports last month also decreased by more than 25%, resulting in a trade surplus for the second straight month. Regarding the recent criticism that this was a recession trade surplus, the ministry official stated that it is not a recession surplus if only the export value decreases while the volume increases. Instead, he added it was more accurate to describe it as a trade surplus driven by stable oil and energy prices. There have been signs of a recovery in export volume. This had been recording year-on-year declines since March, but saw a rise of 7.5% in June. The export volume for semiconductors increased by about 8% in May and over 21% in June. South Korean consumers also have a more optimistic view of the country's economy. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index rose 2.5 percentage points in July from the previous month. Meanwhile, the finance ministry said global economic uncertainties remain, including monetary tightening, the prolonged war in Ukraine, and volatility in raw material prices. In response, the government plans to enhance economic vitality in the latter half of the year by focusing on stabilizing people's livelihoods and addressing price instability and damage caused by heat waves and heavy rain. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The ruling People Power Party vowed on Friday to expand financial benefits for newlyweds, as many couples avoid marriage registration these days due to the so-called marriage penalty. The party leadership said it'll work to ease registered married couples' income requirements so as to make them eligible for low-interest government loans for real estate purchases and offer them more chances at housing subscriptions. The PPP plans to increase the maximum limit of their combined income to be eligible for the loans to up to 100 million won, or around $75,000. That's up by around 30 million won from the current upper limit, where the same limit is applied to individual singles purchasing housing for the first time. The details will be finalized after further discussion. U.S. inflation accelerated 3.2% in July on year, and while it has ticked higher for the first time in 13 months, pundits point out details within the latest data show continued consumer price moderation. Lee Seung-jae explains.
According to data released Thursday by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. consumer prices rose 3.2% on year in July, up from June's 3% increase. Despite the acceleration, the figure still fell below economists' expectations of 3.3%. While the pace of consumer price increases accelerated on an on-year basis for the first time in over a year, it was largely due to year-over-year comparisons to July 2022, when monthly inflation turned negative. On month, prices rose 0.2% due to rising shelter costs, which accounted for 90% of the total increase. Core CPI, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, also increased by 0.2% on month and 4.7% on year, the lowest since October 2021. This was below the Dow Jones's estimate of 4.8%, all of which still signals that inflation is on a downward trend despite the slight acceleration. Food prices rose 0.3% month on month, while energy prices saw a rise of only 0.1%. The latest data shows that while inflation has significantly dropped since the 40-year highs since last year, it's still above the U.S. Fed's target of 2%. While the figures might not be enough to lead the U.S. Central Bank toward cutting rates just yet, it may signal a rate freeze in the FOMC meeting slated for September. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The wildfires that have been scorching the Hawaiian island of Maui for 3 days have killed at least 55 people as of Thursday local time, and the toll is expected to rise. Hawaii Governor Josh Green calls Maui's wildfires the largest natural disaster in the state's history, as they have turned much of the historic town of Lahaina to ruins. Thousands of tourists and locals have been evacuated from the western side of the island, and as many as 1,000 buildings have been destroyed. The wildfires caught Maui off guard after at least 3 major fires broke out on Tuesday. Officials estimate the fire that burned Lahaina was 80% contained by Thursday morning, and none of the other fires were 100% contained. Typhoon Khanun has left South Korea towards into the north. Hundreds of facility damage cases have been reported across the country, while there has been no official casualties reported. Our Choi Soo-young has more.
On Thursday night, central parts of Seoul and the greater metropolitan area saw 80 millimeters of rain per hour from around 9 p.m., all attributable to the effects of Khanun. In addition, the Korea Meteorological Administration said that Seoul is expected to see more rainfall, 5 to 40 millimeters until Saturday, while northern Gyeonggi-do province is forecast to receive 20 to 60 millimeters.
Typhoon Khanun has weakened and moved into North Korea, but in Seoul and here in Hanam, we are still seeing rain.
The typhoon maintained its intensity and making landfall in southern regions of the peninsula, but weakened as it moved along the length of the country to the capital area. As a result, significant damage was avoided, but the typhoon is expected to be recorded as an unusually long-lasting weather event with its heavy downpours. Khanun is the second typhoon to stay over South Korea for more than 12 hours, following Typhoon Solik in 2018. The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters reported, as of 11 a.m., 379 cases of property and facility damage, including residential flooding and a combined submerged agricultural area of over 11.5 square kilometers, or around 3.3 times larger than Central Park in New York. While power outages affecting 46,000 households were also reported, over 98% of them have had theirs restored. However, there are no reported casualties from the typhoon, although there was one drowning incident in Daegu and one person is currently missing. As Typhoon Khanun has moved on to near Pyongyang in North Korea from 11 a.m., all typhoon warnings and restrictions nationwide in South Korea have been lifted. The KMA said that by Sunday, the entire country will be free from the typhoon's influence, but that the extreme heat is expected to return. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
We have some lingering showers for parts of central regions. For northern Gyeonggi-do province, 20 to 60 millimeters are in store. For the Seoul metropolitan area and the surrounding regions, 5 to 40 millimeters are in the forecast. Although the amount of rainfall is fairly trivial compared to yesterday, the ground is still very weak, so continue to take extra precautions. And from this point on, daytime highs will keep rising. By Sunday, sweltering conditions will make a return in Seoul with highs of 32 degrees Celsius. Along with the heat, UV rays will be intense as well. UV ray index will stand in the high to very high range. Strong UV rays are expected for this entire weekend. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 23 degrees. And highs in Seoul will get up to 29, Gwangju 31, Daegu and Gyeongju will be reaching 32 degrees. For National Liberation Day, which is next Tuesday, no rain is in the forecast for Seoul. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Now that is all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a good weekend and a good night.